So next is this rule number 11 is the out of bounds. So out of bounds, the entire playing field is in bounds. So sa whole field or whole entire playing is inbound siya. So the perimeter lines are not part of the playing field and are out of the bounds. So all non-players are part of the outbounds area. So lahat ng players or each teams are part of the bounds area, out of bounds area. So the out of bounds area consists of the ground, which is not in bounds, and everything is in contact with it, and except for the defensive players who are always considered in bounds. So mga defensive players that they are the considered in bounds sila. So next is an offensive player who is not out of bounds is in bounds. So the following are out of bounds, turnover, and no catch is deemed. The desk is in once play is allowed or when play starts or restarts. So this becomes out of bounds when it first contacts the out of bounds area or contract an out of the bounds offensive player. This that has been cuffed by offensive player has the same in or out of the bounds status as the player. If the desk is continuously cuffed by more than one offensive player, one of them being out of bounds, the desk is not bounds. So ayan yun siya. So the desk may fly outside the perimeter line and return to the playing field, and players may go out of the bounds to make a play of the desk. So the place where a desk went out of the bounds is the location where the prior of contacting is an out of bounds area or player that this was not recently, like the partly or wholly over the playing field or contacted by inbounds player. So if the desk is out of the bounds and more than 3 meters from pivot location, non-players may retrieve the disc. The thrower must carry the disc the last 3 meters to the playing field. So ayan siya. Next, the rule number 12 is the receivers and positioning. So a catch occurs when a player has a non-spinning disc trapped between at least 2 body parts. So catch can enable a player to establish position on the desk. So after may establish yung possession, so the player is become a thrower na siya. So the offensive and defensive players catch and disc simultaneously. The offense retains possessions pa rin. So a player's established position is entitled to remain in that position and must not be contacted by the opposing player. So every player is entitled to occupy any position on the field not occupied by opposing player. The receivers and positioning. So sa receivers and positioning, kailangan is you need to have or you need to be ready in your positions as you receive the disc. Next is the turnovers. The rule number 13 is the turnovers. So sa turnover is the transfer position on the desk from one team to another. So the turnover, the transfer position of the desk from one team to another, and a result of stoppage of play. If a player determines turnover has occurred, they must make the appropriate call immediately. So after a stall out call, and siya, if the thrower still has the possession of the desk, but they believe a fast count occurred in such a manner that they did not. So, ayun siya. So, if the thrower made a complete pass, the thrower can contest if they believe it was not stall out or there were fast count immediately prior to the stall out. So, next is any offensive player may take possession of the desk after turnover. So, okay, yung mga offensive player natin is they have the opposition to of the desk after mag-turnover. So, if the player in position after a turnover or after a pull, that has already hit the ground intentionally drop the desk, places the desk on the ground, or transfer position of the desk, they must re-establish possession and restart play with the check. So, after turnover, the turnover location is where the desk has come to stop or pick up by the offensive players. Mga ganun. The intercepting players stops or the thrower is located at the same time of calls. So, next is if the turnover location is the central zone, a thrower must establish a pivot point at the location. So, marami siyang kailangan i-share about doon sa turnovers or rules ng turnovers natin. So, maraming possibilities of mga violations din sa mga gagawa dito. So, next is the rule number 14 is the scoring. So, a goal is scored if an inbounds player catches a legal pass. So, mag-score siya, big sabihin kapag na-catch na yung desk. Legal pass, big sabihin that is scored. So, all their grounds contact entirely within their attacking and end zone or for the airborne player. All of their first simultaneous points of the ground contact after catching the desk are entirely within their attacking and end zone. So, if a player believes a goal has been scored, they may call goal and may stops, and after a contested or retracted the goal, call play must start with a check, and the call is deemed to have been made when the player establishes position. So, if a player is in positions of the desk, this ends with up their selected pivot point behind the attacking goal line without scoring a goal according to the player must establish the pivot point at the nearest location on the goal line. So, kailangan is in position sa every player. Kailangan the viewpoint or the player must establish a pivot point sa kanilang nearest goal line. So, the time at which a goal is deemed to have been scored within the player established possessions. So, next is the rule number 15 is the calling fouls, infractions, and violations. So, dito na rule is we will know kung ano yung mga violations, we will know the calling mga fouls, mga infractions of the game. So, first is a branch of the rules due to non-minor contact between two or more opposing players is a foul. So, next is a branch of the rules regarding a marking or travel branch is infraction. Infraction does not stop play. Every other branch of the rules is violation. So, only the player fouled may claim a foul by calling foul. So, in general, only the thrower may claim infraction by calling the specific name of the infraction. So, however, the offensive player may call a double team, and any defensive player may call the travel infractions. So, any opposing player may claim a violation by calling the specific name of the violation or violation unless specified otherwise by the particular rule. So, call must be immediately after the branch is recognized. So, after a player initiates a stoppage incorrectly, including yung mga mishearing, a call not knowing the rules, or not making the call immediately. So, if the player against whom the foul infraction is violation has been called disagrees that is occurred, or does not think that it's correct all, they must be called contest. So, if a player making all the subsequently determines that their calls was incorrect, they can retract the call by recalling the retracted. So, the stall count resumes as if an accepted branch siya is being caused by the player. So, in a multiple branches occurs on the same play or before play stops, the outcomes should be resolved in the players or reverse sequence, the latest branch first or the earliest branch last. So, players are encouraged to use the WFDF, the hand signal, to communicate all calls. Next is the section or the rule number 16 is the continuation after call. So, after your call, big sabihin, ito na yung gagawin mo, the continuation na. Whenever a foul or violation, a call is made, or a player attempts to stop play in a way, play stops immediately and no turnover is possible unless possible. So, if a foul or violation is called against the thrower and the thrower attempts to pass, or it's been called by the thrower during the act of throwing, or it's been called or occurs when the desk is in the air. So then may continues until position has been established. That's. So regardless of when any calls is made, if the players involved from both teams are agreed the event or call did not affect the outcome, the play stands or the rule is not superseded by the other rule. So next is the rule number 17 sa fouls. So fouls, ito yung mga fouls natin. Sa dangerous play, may receiving fouls, may strip fouls, blocking fouls, force out fouls, and defensive throwing or the marking fouls, the offensive throwing or the thrower fouls, and the indirect fouls, the offsetting fouls. Yun yung mga fouls na maaring magawa ng ating mga player or ating mga team. So that those are the fouls. Those mentioned fouls are the mga things na kailangan i-call out for the fouls. So marami siya. And next is the rule number 18, which is the infraction and violation. So sa infraction, so marking infraction include the following, like for example, the fast count, the straddle, the wrapping, the double team, the vision. That is the marking infractions. So sa fast count, at the starts or continuous the start called illegally, sa mga ganon. So marami siya. And next is a marking infraction may be contested by defense, in which case play stops. After all marking infractions that are contested, so the marker must continue the stall count, which the number last fully uttered before the call. So -1 na yun siya. And the marker may not resume, or hindi na siya continuous ang counting niya until the illegal positioning has been corrected. Kapag hindi na siya continuous ang pag-count, kapag legally or illegal yung ating kapag illegal yung position, yung area kung saan you are corrected. So, to do the otherwise is subsequent marking infraction. So, instead of calling the marking infraction, the thrower may call a marking violation and stop play if the stall count is not corrected, and there is no stall count, and there is an egregious wrong or marking infraction, or there are the patterns repeated from the marking infractions. So, next is the travel infraction. So, sa travel infractions, marami rin siyang marami siyang infractions or belong sa travel. So, travel. Another is the pick violations. So, sa pick violation, if the defensive player is regarding one offensive player and they are prevented from moving towards with the player by another player, the defensive player may call pick. So, however, it is not a pick if both the players being guarded and the obstruction player are marking a play on that disc. Ayan sa. Next is the rule number 19, which is the safety stoppage. So, una is yung sa injury. So, sa injury, may be called by the injured player or may any player or in the injured player's team. So, if the injury was not caused by opponent, the players must choose either to be substitute or to charge their own team with a timeout. So, sa safety natin, kung halimbawa may na injured na tao or injured na player, kailangan siyang the player or the team must choose either the substitute or charge their own team with timeout. So they have the privilege or they have the authority to do those things para maging masecure pa rin yung safetyness sa laro. So if the injury was called by the opponent, the player must choose to stay or to be substitute. If the injured player has established position of the desk and the player has stopped or dropped the desk, due to the injury, that player retains position on the desk. So the injury stoppage is considered to have been called the time of the injury. So unless yung injured players is pinili niya na continue ang play, then that's it. Pwede. So if the desk was in the air with the injury stoppage was called, play continues until either a player established positions or the desk hits the ground if the injury does not result of the foul by an opponent. So the completion or turnover stands and play restart thereafter the stoppage. So next, una is the injury stoppage. Next is the technical stoppage. So sa technical, any players who recognize a conditions that endangers players, including if player has an open or bleeding wound, should call a technical stoppage by calling technical or stop. Play must stop immediately. So kailangan, so for example, pag na-injured ang isang player which is wounded, marami na masyadong bleeding na lumalabas sa kanya, kailangan nang call of technical stoppage. Ibig sabihin, calling of technical or stop. So, the play must be stopped immediately. So, a teammate, coach, or designated official should actively alert dapat yung mga players natin in any condition of the endangered players. Kailangan maging aware ka sa mga teammates mo, especially yung mga coaches na halimbawa, they should kailangan maging aware sila kung ano yung mga status ng kanilang players. So, next, the thrower may call technical stoppage during the play to replace a severely damaged. So, after a technical stoppage called while the desk is in the air or in a play is continued unknowingly. So, next, if a player substitute after an injury or due to illegal or faulty equipment, the opposing team may be also choose to substitute one player. So, yun siya. So, ang mga player is, halimbawa, they need to substitute whether may injury siya or may illegal or faulty equipment na siyang ginawa or ginamit. So, next is the timeout. So, timeout is the player calling timeout must be form of T with their hands or with one hand, and the desk should call timeout to opposing player. So, T, yan siya, timeout. Kailangan may sign ang mga players na kung gusto nila mag-timeout. Yan siya. So, after the start of the point and before both teams have signals readiness, a player from either team may call a timeout. So, yun siya. So, after the pull out or pull, only a thrower with possessions of the desk may call a timeout. The timeout starts with the T or is a form that lasts 75 seconds after such a timeout. So, substitutions are not allowed except for injury. So, sa timeouts, hindi siya pwede mag-substitute kung except kung may injury na siya. So, play is restarted at the pivot location. So, the thrower must remain the same. So, all other offensive players must establish the stationary position at any location. So, the offensive players are selected positions. Defensive players must be established also the stall counts or establish the stall counts, restarts, and stalling 1. So, if the thrower attempts to call a timeout while play is live and when their team has no remaining timeouts, play is stopped. So, the marker must add 2 seconds to stall count they would have restarted play on before restarting play with a check. If this result is stall count, then 10 or above this is a stall count's turnover. So, that's it for the rule number 20, timeouts. So, okay, that's all for this rules of the Frisbee or the ultimate. Thank you and God bless. Keep safe, everyone.